Alright everyone, welcome back. This is going to be the next installment of our video series here. In this particular video, we're going to talk about subtracting real numbers. It's going to be very straightforward. I don't imagine it's going to be a horribly long video, and hopefully a lot of it's going to be a review. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we can rewrite subtraction as the addition of the opposite value. That way we can sort of apply the commutative and associative property of an addition. Commutative and associative property of addition later on down the road to help us rearrange and simplify our expressions. So the really fundamental component of this is to subtract real numbers. We just want to add the opposite of the second number. So if it is subtraction, we're going to add a negative. It is the subtraction of a negative number, we're going to add the positive version. So here's a perfect example where we have a subtraction operation going on here, and we're subtracting a negative 14. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the operation to addition, and we're going to make it the addition of the opposite of this particular term. So since that initial term was negative 14, the opposite of negative 14 is going to be positive 14. So it's kind of like a double negative scenario where if you have a double negative, you're going to go in the positive direction. So 6 plus 14 is going to be equivalent to 20. Now this is a slightly different scenario. The numerical values are the same. We have 6 and 14. However, the negative symbols are rearranged. So right now we're going to have negative 6 minus 14. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change it to addition. And then we're going to change it to the addition of negative 14. Now, sometimes students think adding quantities in this manner is a little bit easier. Similar to what we talked about in the addition video, if we have negative 6 plus a negative 14, that's going to be equivalent as saying the absolute value of each of these, 6 plus 14, which is 20, and then at the end, making that negative. So at the end of the day, negative 6 minus 14 is going to be equal to negative 20, and we can walk it through this sequence of transforming the expression from a subtraction problem to an addition problem following these basic steps. Now here we're going to have negative 21 minus a negative 13. This first term is negative, which is slightly different than the first example. Here we have the subtraction of a negative. Sometimes you'll see me do notation like this. However, if we follow the sequence, we're going to make the opposite of negative 13 positive 13, then it ends up being negative 21 plus 13. Now, another way we could go about simplifying this is saying, taking the absolute value of this first term, making it 21, and then just subtracting these two values, which would give us 8. And then, since the negative absolute value is larger, we would then call that negative 8. And if you think of the absolute value of negative 21 and the absolute value of 13, the quantity of the absolute value of negative 21 is larger than the absolute value of 13, which tells me that it's the end result, the end sum is going to be negative. And if we think about it another way, we could say negative 8 plus negative 13 is equal to negative 21. Now, if we break it up in this way, this negative 13 plus 13 becomes 0 because each negative cancels out with one positive, which results in a negative 8. And that's just another way that we can look at the work that we're trying to do here. Now, here's a fun example which involves fractions, and we know from our previous work, we can't combine fractions that don't have the same denominator. So in this case, we're going to look to see what is the LCD of 11 and 5. And one thing we know is 11 is prime and 5 is prime, which makes them relatively prime. So the LCD is actually going to be the product of the two numbers, which is going to be equal to 55. Now, in short, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to multiply this first fraction by 5 over 5, and we're going to need to multiply this second fraction by 11 over 11. So this is going to give me 25 over 55, because 5 times 5 is 25, 5 times 11 is 55, and then 1 times 11 is 11, and then 5 times 11 is 55. And now that we have the same denominator, we can do 25 minus 11 over 55, or we could say 14 over 55. Now, I'm going to be looking to see if I can simplify this. However, I know that 55 only has two factors other than one in itself, and that's 5 and 11, neither of which are a factor of 14. So since 14 and 55 are relatively prime, which means their greatest common factor is 1, we can't simplify this any further. Now here's another one of those examples where we have a subtraction of a negative. So what we're going to do is we're going to change our operation to addition, and then it's going to be the addition of the opposite of this term right here. So since the original is a negative, what we're going to do is make it a positive, which ends up resulting in 0, because we know anytime we add a number and its opposite, the sum is going to be equal to 0. Now, just to recap with this example, when you are subtracting a negative, we want to always add the opposite. So here, I want you to pause it, and I want you to do some of this work. Tell me what A is, and then tell me what B is, and then tell me what C is. So go ahead and pause it now, and then I'm going to work it out here in a second. All right, chances are you didn't pause it. That's okay. But here we got is -8 plus a -2, because anytime we're subtracting, we're adding the opposite. Since this is negative and this is negative, the sum is going to be -10. Now here we have 23 minus 28. We could say 23 plus a -28, and that's going to be equal to 23 plus a -23 plus a -5. Because I know 23 plus 5 is 28. 23 plus -23 is 0, so this results in just a -5. And then here we're subtracting a negative, which ends up giving 5 plus 3, which is going to be equal to 8. So anytime we're subtracting, we can take it into the addition of the opposite value. So plus -2, plus -8, plus 3. Now, if you have any questions, feel free to comment, send me a message, send me an email. Let me know what I can do to help provide some additional clarification. Hopefully this was helpful, and I look forward to hearing your feedback.